program, it is the basic concept, right? So we are not actually discussing here the advanced concepts. So it's only the introduction to the subject, because the subject itself is so large, it's so huge, that you need more than a week of a program to actually start understanding it. So we are just introducing the subject to you, and if you have in between any question, any doubt, anything you want to discuss, feel free, because you will also understand that this online presentations, these online webinars are very monotonic. So I am just in front of the screen and then I'm speaking for 1 hour, 1.5 hours. That is very monotonic. That is boring, to be very frank. So if you have any question in between, you feel free to ask, because we have kept sufficient time for each of the lectures. It's a 2 hours lecture, meaning, I mean, of course the lecture will be about 1.5 hours and some time is there for question and answer, but then I would request all of you to be frank and just interrupt me and ask questions whatever you have. So I hope you all have the schedule of the lectures that are going to be presented. So it's a 10 lecture series spread over 5 days. Since it's only introduction to the subject, we will try to cover many topics that are relevant on this the subject of seismic analysis and design. So we will start with the today's session on how vulnerable Indian structures are. So to understand that vulnerability, we will discuss what is the Indian seismicity and how structures have performed in the past. That I will take. So in the afternoon, there will be a lecture on, I mean, obviously, once we identify what is the seismicity of India and what is the vulnerability of these Indian structures, the next obvious step is to understand how do we determine the seismic hazard in these regions. So that lecture will be taken by Professor Sandeep Das. And then tomorrow we will actually start the basic concepts of earthquake resistant design of structures. That will be covered by me. And before we actually go into the analysis method of analysis given in our design codes, we will also briefly see what is the fundamentals of seismic control of structures. So there are two bifurcations actually. In one method, we can design the structures such that they have sufficient earthquake resistance to resist the structure, to resist the seismic loads. But on the other hand, we also have techniques available using which we can isolate these structures. So we can design these structures in a normal way, but then we can input some other additional devices. We can construct some additional devices in the structure so as to control the response of the structure. So those things will be covered in brief in that lecture. Then the third day will continue with the discussion on the concepts of earthquake resistant design with the response spectrum method, the capacity design concept method. That will be taken by another Professor Kaustubh Das Gupta. I think you already know him. He already took one lecture some time back. And then slowly we will move on to the design aspects of the earthquake resistant, this training program. So we'll see how these masonry infill RC frames will be designed, because I chose this subject because it is one of the most commonly found buildings in the country. And then we'll also discuss the analysis and design methods for buildings with reinforced concrete shear walls. Those are the new types of structures that are coming up in India very commonly now. And then a little bit on retrofitting of structures, seismic retrofitting, some common methods which are easy to implement, that will be discussed in the lecture. And then in the end, I will discuss some basic concepts of nonlinear analysis of structures. Though our code does not require nonlinear analysis of common structures, but then there are many instances in which such nonlinear analysis is essential. So these are the 10 lectures that will be covered in the next 5 days. So that's about 20 hours of discussion, and I hope it will be very fruitful to all of you. So if at all anybody has any idea on how many postgraduate students are here presently? Vipul, any idea? Vipin, sorry. Okay, 27 postgraduate. Very good. Yeah, that is okay. Faculty members are okay, but I just wanted to know. I mean, these 27 are from structural engineering background. Okay, great. So that will help actually. All right. Okay, so let me start today's presentation. It is basically the uh, Indian seismicity and how different buildings have actually performed during during these events. I hope my screen is visible. Okay, so let us see what is the type of type of earthquakes that India have encountered in recent past. Now, when I say recent, the definition is not very definitive, in the sense that it may be 200 years, it may be 300 years, or it may be 50 years. So recent doesn't mean anything. So recent means only our memory that we can recall. So we all of us know why earthquakes are occurring in India. Okay, so we have this Indo-Australian plate that is actually going beneath the Eurasian plate since millions of years. So this has been happening, and therefore we have the Himalayas, and we have these Indo-Gangetic plains, and we have the several thrusts in the Himalayan areas, and we have several plate. I mean, this plate boundary, because of which we encounter so many earthquakes in this region. So wherever you see that red line, these are the areas where we have the earthquakes. Now, these are some of the major Indian earthquakes that have occurred in the past. So if I want to list the earthquakes which are great, so great earthquakes are defined as those earthquakes whose magnitude is greater than 8. So if I mean I can uh, show here these 5 earthquakes starting from 1819. So there is little bit of literature documentation of that earthquake. So Kutch earthquake, that of magnitude 8.3. So before 1819, getting literature is difficult. So, and then we have 1897, very famous Assam earthquake. Some of you already might be knowing that after this Assam earthquake, the intensity scale was changed. Right before that, there was no intensity 12 in that scale, but after this earthquake, the uh, the site condition was such that another scale was added to that. I mean, the scale 12. So after that, we had 1905 Kangra earthquake, again 8.6 magnitude, and then 1934 Bihar Nepal earthquake 8.4, 1950 Assam earthquake 8.7. Now we are after 1950, we have not yet witnessed any great earthquake in this region, in the entire country. So if you look at, if you want to observe it closely, we had from 1897 to 1950, we had 4 great earthquakes, right? So in about 53 years of time duration, we had 4 earthquakes in India. But after that, in last 70 years, we have no great earthquake in India. So that is what people say, that now an earthquake is due. And if you look at the Himalayan plate boundaries, that region, the Himalayan region, it is actually easy to understand that some people say that there is a seismic gap in that region, because earthquakes have occurred in different parts, in different zones of that region, but then in between there is some gap. So we expect some earthquakes. Now, there was an earthquake in Nepal in 2015, but that was, the magnitude was slightly less than 8, so I have not included it here, but that fills one of the gaps. But then that's a different story, because the earthquake was absolutely a different kind of earthquake. So if we now look at those slightly smaller earthquakes, there was an earthquake in Bhuj 2001. That was a very big earthquake. And I mean, it is in fact the biggest earthquake after this 1950 that caused havoc in the western part. Then we had the huge 2004 Sumatra earthquake and tsunami, but that did not occur. The epicenter was not in India. The magnitude was 9.3. This is one of the biggest earthquake on the earth. Now, why I've included here, because though the epicenter of this earthquake was about 1200 kilometers away from India, we still had damage because of ground shaking in India. And I'll show you some of those pictures of buildings and structures that damaged. And it is very surprising that 1200 kilometers away from earthquake, we had the damage. Then we have smaller, I mean comparatively smaller, but still a major earthquake of magnitude 6.9 in Sikkim. Then of course this 2015 Nepal earthquake, and in 2016 is the most recent big earthquake that has occurred in India, that is Imphal earthquake. Now fortunately I have covered all these earthquakes. After 2001 I have covered all the major earthquakes that have occurred in India, and of course outside, for example Nepal and Sumatra earthquake. And the story is really interesting, so I'll try to tell you some of these stories in the today's presentation. So this is very famous seismic zoning map of India given by IS 1893, the Seismic Design Code of India, which is revised in 2016. So now here you can see Jabalpur is in seismic zone 3, right? So the risk is very less, hazard is very less. So you will find that the quality of construction, the type of reinforcement detailing, the type of material that is being used in Jabalpur will be inferior to what is being used in other places which are in seismic zone 4 and 5. Now the basic reason of this is the design forces are different in these regions. So design forces in Guwahati, for example, will be much higher for the same structure if it is built in Jabalpur. So this table here, which shows the seismic zone and corresponding Z values. So you can see here for Jabalpur, the Z value is 0.16. We will discuss what is the Z value in greater detail in not in this lecture, but later when we start designing. So Z value for Jabalpur is 0.16. And Z value for Guwahati for all these red regions is 0.36, right? So it is more than twice, right? So I mean, if everything remains same, the same structure, we have to design for more than 2 times forces if it is constructed in Guwahati. So that is perhaps the reason that we have so much of difference in quality of construction. Now, I will start with this 1988 Bihar-Nepal earthquake. It was still a smaller earthquake than what I discussed previously. But the reason that I'm discussing this earthquake here is very interesting. I'll discuss this in the later part of the presentation, why this earthquake I'm discussing. But it was a 6.6 magnitude earthquake, occurred very early in the morning on 21st of August in 1988. The maximum intensity was 8,000 deaths were reported, 16,000 injuries. Now in India, it is very interesting that during summer people sleep outside, or I would rather say people used to sleep outside during summer. Nowadays, people have stopped doing that because of many issues, but because of that, in 1988, most people were sleeping outdoors in that region, and then the number of casualties were very less because of that. But the damage was huge, and there was a very big great earthquake in 1934 in the similar in the same zone. So the damage trend was very similar in different regions. For example, in Munger, which is in Bihar, and Kathmandu, which is in Nepal. So the damage was similar. So the bridges as well as the buildings, both types of structures were hugely damaged. There was liquefaction, which was also reported to some parts. Damage was even reported as far as Darjeeling and Sikkim, which is of course very far from the center. Now, this is a very famous photograph. It's a two-story cycle stand cum canteen building at ITI Darbhanga. Okay, that it collapsed during that earthquake. Now, why I'm showing this picture here, because this is a very simple structure. There was not much load on this structure because it's only a cycle stand cum canteen. It's not a very high structure where you have huge loads. A very small structure, a small earthquake, I mean, this structure collapsed. And you can see here what is the reinforcement detailing in the structure. So you can very easily locate the bars from the beam and which are not actually inserted into the column as it should have been, right? And another interesting thing here is this: the columns are circular and beams are rectangular. So anyway, their correction was very weak. Now, in this case, the ground story was RC frame construction, and on the upper floor, it's only brick wall. So there was no columns in the upper floor. Columns were there in only the ground floor. So the complete story collapsed here. That was the status of construction in 1988. You see how the structure has completely collapsed. And it's, I mean, very clearly visible here that it's only a two-story, I mean, ground floor and the first floor structure. No loading, nothing is here. But it was constructed so poorly that the complete collapse of wall and other parts of structures completely collapsed. And similar collapses were reported in many other structures. So here you can see a long structure. Again, the collapse of masonry walls. The such collapses are very common in structure during earthquakes, because these are the very long structures which generally we do not provide intermediate support. But if you provide intermediate supports to the structures in the form of small columns, then we can actually improve their lateral load performance. This is a madrasa, the Hamidiya Madrasa in Darbhanga. So it was actually again a masonry jack arch roof which completely collapsed. You can see school buildings or the college buildings, madrasas. These are some of the structures which are long span. And even if the span is not long, the length of the entire structure is very long, just to accommodate several classrooms and other functional rooms. So such school buildings, they are vulnerable if not designed properly. So here several school children and adults were killed during the earthquake. So here you can see everything collapsed actually, whatever was there on the in the premises. Now again, in Munger, you can see the two-story residential masonry building. There was no need actually for this building to collapse. It's not a big building, it's very small building, but it completely collapsed. The damage to the arches is actually very common during earthquakes. So if you know what is the role of arch, when vertical load falls on this arch, it tries to actually move apart. So there is a tension in this arch always. So our role is actually to reduce this tension and bring compression into the picture. So that is the whole game of providing that key here. If you remember, there is a key in the center, but then it was not sufficient in this case because it's very old. It was not serviced or maintained properly. So such type of arch failures were very common during this earthquake. This is a T-beam bridge in Sikkim that failed during 1988 Bihar-Nepal earthquake. Again, it was not very near to the epicenter, but then because of poor construction, because of poor maintenance, the complete one section of the bridge actually it damaged severely. And you can see the section of that bridge which is collapsed. The same bridge, because of the landslides also, some damage was there. So landslides during earthquakes is again a common scenario. Now this is the reason that I showed you this earthquake, this particular earthquake, 1988, because that was 32 years back, right? And some of you were not even born at that time. Now, what do you think is the progress in the last 32 years? The only progress that I can see is the extensive use of reinforced concrete. In urban areas, we generally do not find these masonry buildings. We find only the reinforced concrete buildings. Now the question is, are we safer now? Even though we are constructing these reinforced concrete buildings, are we safer? How is the performance of these buildings? In rural areas, we are again, we are constructing these masonry buildings. The scenario may be similar, maybe better. Let us see. So in 32 years, what we have achieved as structural engineers. So this is the urban scenario in any big city in India. This is Navi Mumbai, New Bombay, and this is Gangtok. So these are all big cities in the capital cities in different states. So you can see the difference in the construction practice, the type of structures that are being constructed, the type of material in different cities. It's very, for example, this Gangtok city, it's very haphazard. There is no planning. The buildings are constructed so near to each other. The type of structures are different, heights of buildings are different. But in the previous slide here, you can see there is a particular planning. The structures are used in a better planned way. But the point is, in all these cities, we have these masonry infill RC frame systems now. The unreinforced masonry has been replaced by these masonry infill RC frame system, and of course some steel buildings are also there, shear wall buildings are also there. But then I'm more inclined towards discussing this type of structure, which is a masonry infill RC frame. So here what we have is a RC frame, and then we put these masonry walls in the open spaces between the frame, and we get this masonry infill RC frame. Now, before I discuss further about this masonry infill RC frame, let us see what is the difference between the gravity load and the earthquake load, and why do we need to consider these earthquake loads specially. So the gravity load is vertical, earthquake loads are horizontal, that we already know. And under this vertical load, under this gravity load, the stretching of members and the location of the tension in different members is already known. So we already know that this is the beam bottom is always subjected to stretching or tension. So we always provide that tension reinforcement at the beam bottom, compression reinforcement at the beam top, in the midspan, and as we go towards the support, we reverse the location of these bars. And this is very straightforward. We have been following since several decades. They are very good at it. Now during earthquakes, because the earthquake load is cyclic in nature, we have the tension and compression in different members that change the location. So in one instance, we have tension at one location on one face, and the other instance, the tension changes. For example, here, for load acting from left to right, you have tension in this column here, and on the top of the column you have tension here. But when in a moment when the load changes that direction, the tension side also changes. So this is not easy thing to design then. So what we do, we provide the tension reinforcement on both the faces, right? So that is the primary difference between the earthquake load design and the gravity load design. Similarly, the beams also. Here you can see the tension at the top. Here you can see the tension at the bottom, and here you can see the tension at the top. Okay, so because of this, we have different bending of the members. So this is the bending moment diagram in case of gravity load design. This is the bending moment diagram in case of earthquake load design. So you can see here in case of gravity load, we always has the maximum bending moment at the center of the beam. But in case of lateral loads, earthquake loads, we have the bending moment maximum near the ends of the structures, in the ends of the building, sorry, members. Now this is very interesting. Those of you who are into the nonlinear analysis of the structures, I'm sure some of the MTech students, some of the PhD students, they may be doing nonlinear analysis. And where do we model the plastic hinges? Where do we assume damage is going to occur in these frames? Is near the ends of the beams, near both the ends of the beams, and near both ends of the column. So here, these are the locations where we actually model the non-linearity in the buildings, right? Now this is the reason. Why do we do this? Because we expect more bending moments here, more rotation here, and these are the locations where failure will occur first. Okay, whether the loading is from left to right or from right to left, in both the cases. So therefore, we model these plastic hinges here, and we'll discuss these things more in greater detail in my last presentation on 5th day, when I discuss the nonlinear analysis of the structures. So this is what I was saying, that earthquake shaking reverses tension and compression in members, and therefore we need the reinforcement on both the faces. So this is simple. The understanding is simple, but then like in gravity load design, we always try to be economical, right? We cannot simply have any structure and then we provide 10 bars of 20 mm diameter and feel safe about it. But then that structure will be very expensive. So when we strive for the economical structures, then we have to design these structures properly. So simply saying that we provide tension reinforcement on both faces will not suffice, right? We have to properly design them. We have to find out the exact bending moment, shear force, axial force, and accordingly we have to design such that that design bending moment should not be crossed. It should not be less than uh, the forces that are acting in the from the external systems. For example, the earthquake loads. So now, if we come back to the building configuration, so there are several types of irregularities, and our IS code, even starting from 2002, it devotes a complete section on configuration of building. Even in 2016 version, they have several pages of clauses on configuration, on irregularities of structures. Because we can design the regular structure very easily, but as soon as there is some irregularity, we have to be more careful. And it is actually not possible to have any structure without any irregularity. Whenever there is a structure, there has to be some irregularity. We cannot have perfectly symmetric structure. Even if ideally, if you can design and construct a perfectly symmetric structure, you don't know which direction earthquake waves are coming from, right? What types of earthquake waves are going to strike the structure. So in that sense, nothing can be symmetric, right? Because earthquakes can occur in any direction, it can struck in any direction. Okay. So we have to be careful. Therefore, the seismic code, it devotes a complete section on these. Now, what are the materials generally we use? These are concrete, very commonly used, reinforcing steel, and masonry. Masonry is the most commonly used construction material in India. If you club everything, all the structures in the entire country, urban areas, rural areas, semi-urban areas, masonry structures constitute about 80% or maybe 85% of all the structures, right? So that is why I'm more interested in these structures, the masonry, because these are more vulnerable, and these are required. We don't have updated design codes for these structures, although we have design codes for concrete and steel structures. So then the important point here is the material properties, the quality of the materials, workmanship, and section properties. So all these things are very important for proper behavior of the structure. Now I will just spend some time on this role of masonry infills on these buildings, and then I'll go back again to the structural performance in past earthquakes. Because when we understand how masonry affects the structure, then it is easier actually to observe the damages during earthquakes. Why do we use this masonry infill? Because it is very inexpensive, it is very easily available. But the problem is we treat this masonry as non-structural. We think that many times you will find in any building, the people generally, they remove a wall just to increase the size of the room, or they construct a wall in between just to have two rooms made from a single bigger room, right? Now this idea comes because we think that masonry is non-structural. and we don't believe that the masonry infill modifies the structural response. But then we will discuss more why this belief is not correct. And since we believe this, we don't consider them important enough to be considered in analysis and design. So the problem then remains that we analyze some structure without considering infill. We design some other structure again without considering infill, but considering the mass of the infill on the beams and the slab, and we construct something else, right? So the formulation, the analysis is different, design is something else, and construction is completely different. So therefore the performance is very poor. Now what happens really? So masonry has very high compressive strength and stiffness. uh, I think in my previous webinar I showed you a chart where I showed the variation of this masonry strength in the country. So it varies from 2.5 MPa to 45 MPa, if you remember that. Some of you, I hope, were there in that presentation. So when I say that masonry has very high compressive strength and stiffness, but then people can do this. I'm sure in this group of students that we have today, many will be able to break a brick with single hand. So using that karate or the elbow, people can do this. But I mean, on the other hand, I'm saying that masonry is very good in compression. So why people can actually break this masonry? So the answer is very simple here. The action is different. I'm saying the masonry is good in compression, but this guy is not failing this brick in compression. It is in fact failing the brick in flexure. So these are the two supports here, and over which he has put this brick here and applying the load at the center. So obviously the brick does not fail in compression, but it fails in tension. And we know that bricks, the concrete, they are very weak in tension. What will happen if this brick is kept on the floor? This elbow will be broken. But then I'll show you another photograph here. So when I say that brick has very high compressive strength and stiffness, but then this is possible. There are people who can actually do this. Now you can see here, this entire prism is supported at the base, right? And it is not acting as a simply supported beam or something like that. And when this guy applies that force, you can find these vertical splitting cracks in the brick, in the masonry. Now, how is it possible then? Because it is not failing in tension. So it is still possible because again the action is different. When you, it is not a brick, right? Now it is a masonry. So masonry is a combination of the brick and the mortar. And when you club these two material, the Poisson's ratio is different for masonry and for mortar. Now, mortar is generally very soft compared to the bricks. So when you apply the load, the mortar tries to actually expand more. The brick does not expand by the same amount, but because of the perfect bond between these two materials, because of that interaction, when the mortar wants to stretch, the bricks do not stretch. So obviously there will be tension in the brick. So although it appears here that the failure is by compression, but the real failure in this case is by tension in the bricks. So this is still possible, but then don't try this. You can try this in your home, but never try this because it is very risky. I don't know how this guy has done that, but then the mechanics is still understandable. So like I said, there is a huge variation in the brick strength in the masonry. And when we put this masonry wall inside the reinforced concrete frame, the interaction between wall and reinforced concrete frames becomes so complex that still people are actually not able to design these types of structures to a acceptable level. Now, it is easy to imagine that when you apply the lateral load on this frame, the frame is flexible, right? If you don't have the masonry wall, the frame is flexible. It will try to deform in a natural way. But then the masonry wall is not flexible. It will not allow that frame to deform naturally. So there will be, because of that change in the nature, deformability, there will be this part of the frame will be connected to the wall, and because it wants to deform, there will be gaps here, right? So therefore you have formation of these cracks here. Now these cracks are the tension cracks. So when you apply this load from left to right, the axial force is transferred through the wall like this, and this part of the wall is under compression. So obviously this part is under tension. So when the wall is under tension in this part, you have cracks like this. So therefore you will find these diagonal cracks. And in the next photographs that I am going to show you, you can now imagine why these diagonal cracks, X cracks, form in the wall. Because of the same issue. And if I apply the load from right to left, you have the diagonal crack in the perpendicular direction, in this direction. Okay, because the masonry is under tension in the opposite direction. So this is the reason why we have the formation of the diagonal strut. So this is the basic load transfer mechanism. So this is a predominant frame action if you don't have masonry infill walls. So there will be bending moments and shear forces. So this is a prominent frame action. The frame resists the load, the lateral earthquake load, from the flexural action. But as soon as you put these masonry infill walls, most of the lateral load is directly transferred to this infill, and the bending moments in these members, it reduces. It reduces to, large extent. For example, if the bending moment here in these members is x, the bending moment here will be 0.1x, or even less than 0.1x, or 0.15x. So it reduced drastically. Even the shear forces are reduced. But the axial forces, most of this load is transferred to the wall as axial force. So the point of showing all these things to you is that infill actually plays a significant role in resisting the lateral load, the earthquake load. But there is no role of infill in resisting the vertical gravity load, because there is a beam here, and the beam is actually designed to carry that vertical gravity load. The deformation of beam is not such that it can transfer the load over to the masonry wall, right? So the masonry wall has no role to play as far as the gravity loads are concerned, resisting the gravity loads are concerned. Okay. So now we understand that masonry infill has a very high significance on RC frame behavior. So irregularities because of masonry infill is again a big problem. So here we find many places where we actually provide the masonry infill walls only up to a partial height. Now because of that, what happens that this part of the column is free. This part of the column is actually constrained or restrained by these walls on both the sides. So then this length of the column becomes very short. And you can imagine what happens to the short columns. So a very simple equation is the moment is actually shear times the length, right? So kilonewton meter. So if you want to find out how much is the shear approximately, so that shear will be moment by length, and when length reduces, that shear enhances, this shear increases drastically. So for short columns, you have huge shear forces, and that is the reason that you have the shear failure in these short columns. Okay, so this is the partial height infill walls does not help actually. Now, if we have open ground story or open first story buildings, then again you have a severe irregularity related to mass, related to stiffness and strength. So here you can see that this multi-story building is open to accommodate parking. Okay, so when you apply lateral load, the lateral deformation profile of this open ground story building, which is this line, is completely different than the fully infilled frame in which the infill walls are provided in all the stories like here. Okay, so this purple line shows the lateral deformation of different stories for fully infilled frame. This black line shows the accumulation of the lateral displacement in only the ground floor. You can see most of the displacement is accumulated here, and all the upper stories are more or less vertical. So that is the problem with the open ground story buildings. And this is the bare frame response, assuming that there is no infill wall anywhere. So obviously you will have higher deformation, because these stiffer masonry infill walls are removed. So because of this accumulation, what happens to these ground floor columns is that the ductility demand is huge and therefore they fail. So this is one example from 1999 Kocaeli earthquake in Turkey, where you can see that the vertical line, the vertical story, the top stories, upper stories are remaining vertical, whereas the bottom story, which is open, is actually deformed. This is a very perfect example of the theory that we just saw. This building was under construction, so it did not fail, but then you can see the building on the background, a very similar building but occupied, it completely collapsed. Now, because the loads were more on this story, after completion, additional loads were there. Now here there's a huge mass sitting over these columns, which are simple sticks, matchsticks kind of columns. So it completely collapsed. But here, since it was not complete, construction was not complete, so collapse was avoided. So the point here is, it is actually not possible to design these open ground story buildings. So eventually such buildings will collapse, like we have observed hundreds of such buildings collapsed in Bhuj during Gujarat earthquake. We cannot actually have such buildings without damage. So this building, for example, was only a two-story building in Port Blair. There's an area in Port Blair called Bamboo Flats in Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Like I said, the earthquake epicenter was about 1100 to 1200 kilometers from this part, from this building. Still this building collapsed, and you can see how badly, what a catastrophic collapse it is. So you can see all the walls, even even the roof, it collapsed, and you can see the car lying here. So this open ground story was constructed to protect the car, but then it could not protect, right? The car could not be taken out. So this is what happens. You can see here what has happened to the staircase. Now, what is the reason that this building has collapsed 1100 kilometers away from the epicenter? The only reason is very poor construction, very poor planning, very poor configuration. The material was very poor. So then, but we are still constructing open ground story buildings. The reason is we don't have, we actually did not have up to 2016 proper design guidelines in the design codes. The strengthening clauses are not there still. We have, of course, negligence from society, chalta hai attitude is there in almost all of us. And we don't learn from past. We simply forget. The reason is these earthquakes are not very frequent. But when they occur very vividly. We have so much of damage, so many people die, but we have different types of problems to address, like, I mean, many other types of hazards are there. Poverty is there. So the basic thing is, then what is the what is the biggest priority of the country? So we tend to forget. Now let me show you what is the scenario at the global level. So I just discussed India, a case of India with you, but here I'm showing you the national design codes of many countries that talk about masonry infill. And all the shaded, all the areas which have cross marks here, which are marked in a different color, you can see there's these are the properties, or these are the points which are not covered in these design codes. For example, D means the dynamic analysis. Whether dynamic analysis is required, yes or no. You can see most of the codes, they say that yes, dynamic analysis is required for such buildings which have masonry infill RC frame system. Do they have a different method to calculate the natural period? That is defined by TA. Now this part is very interesting, and we will discuss this part when we actually discuss how to design these buildings. There is a presentation specifically on design aspects, so we'll discuss this part. So it means that does the code specify for how much percentage of design forces the frame is to be designed, and how much percentage infill is to be designed? So you can see most of the codes, they don't have any such requirement, but some codes have. Then the irregularities, so there are certain provisions for irregular structures, I mean for design provisions. There are some in which there is no related to masonry infill. So irregularity in the elevation, the stiffness characteristics, drift values, then the strength of masonry, stiffness of masonry, the openings in the masonry, and out of plane collapses. So there are so many problems associated with these buildings, but then you can see most of the design codes in the entire world, they don't address these problems. Now, one reason here is most of the countries, they follow design codes of the developed nations. For example, the design codes of America, USA. And you can find here in USA, there is none of these things are yes, because they don't have masonry infill RC frame system. They have realized that these systems are very poor, they are very vulnerable, they don't construct such kind of systems. But they have masonry buildings, huge number of masonry buildings are there, but not masonry infill RC frame system, because of the obvious reasons that we have already discussed, that these are complex systems. So they don't have this. Now, because they don't have this, any of these requirements, most of the other countries also fail to actually do the tests, sufficient number of tests, because they don't have that much infrastructure, they don't have that much amount of finances available. But there are certain countries in Europe in which have huge number of such structures, so they have certain provisions. You can see here for Eurocode 8. And similarly, there are certain other countries where such buildings are common and they have certain, for example, uh, FEMA. FEMA is again not a code, but it is a document developed in USA. So it has certain provisions, but there is not a code. What is the point here is such kind of building systems are actually uh, not, I mean, they are popular in many countries, but they are not designed properly in most of these countries. So because of that gaps and the compression areas in the masonry infill system, you have this realistic system. So when we go on increasing the lateral load, the gap areas between the frame and the infill, it increases, right? The contact area, it go on reducing when you go on increasing the lateral load. So there is a method by which we can analyze. So this method is called equivalent diagonal strut methods. So it has come from this fundamentals. And like I said, that when you provide infill wall, so here you can see this is a bare frame. This is an infill frame, and I have modeled the infill frame using shell elements, so completely filled. I've modeled here the infill frame using equivalent diagonal strut elements. So you can see, just compare these two numbers. So here I am showing the bending moments. Here I am showing the shear force, and this is the axial force. So these are the force resultants in the columns. So when the infill wall is not there, look at the bending moment. And as soon as I provide infill wall, see the bending moment has reduced drastically, right? Even the shear force has reduced, the axial forces are more or less same. Okay, and same with the other things. For any model you consider, the bending moment reduces. So this is the main problem. Even if you consider infill in the design, it is not safe if you only design for this bending moment. And similarly for the beams also. So you can see the bending moment in the beam also reduces. So therefore, the design code, for example, previous design code IS 1893-2002, it actually had some provisions on open ground story buildings. So the provision was either you do a nonlinear dynamic analysis, that means time history analysis, or you do a static analysis and design these ground floor beams and columns for 2.5 times the forces and shear walls for 1.5 times. But then slowly these clauses were removed, and we have now more rational design scheme, such that the current code IS 1893, it says that you completely avoid open ground story buildings in zone 5, right, by having proper planning, by providing alternate arrangements. But then we can also devise some strengthening schemes, more rational strengthening schemes for such buildings. But the retrofitting of such buildings is very difficult, because once the building is there, it's very difficult actually to retrofit it. But then we have to take care during the design stage itself, and we will discuss this. Now let us see, once we understood how the masonry infill actually influenced the behavior of RC frame, let us see what happened in the real life. Now, this is the exact reason why I showed you some slides showing the nature of masonry infill when we put in the RC frame. The reason is because in urban areas, wherever we have earthquakes, we always have such buildings, right? So here you can see this building, and now you can imagine, now you can identify the different types of irregularities in this building. Of course, you have open ground, you have open ground story here, and then you have partially infilled frames, right? In this case, and you can see the size of the columns is very less. Okay, look at this building here, where this intermediate story is open. So this is not an open ground story, but this is an intermediate open story. Now what happened here? It is a building in Sikkim near Gangtok. So it's I think it's a 6 or 7 story building. If you have been to any hill station, you can see how buildings are constructed there. So from one level, if you are on a road and if you look at a building, you can see only 2 or 3 story of that building. But if you travel down that road, you will find another 3-4 stories of that building below that level, right? So it's a very typical, very different type of construction practice in hilly region. So this is a 5-6 story building. So the owner of the building, he sold different stories to different people. So these are flats, but this story could not be sold, right? So he simply did not bother to construct this story completely. So it was simply kept open. And this is not the same building, but then this is a similar type of building in which intermediate story was kept open. It's in Bhuj. It was in Bhuj, a school building, and during the earthquake it collapsed. Right. So these are the types of irregularities which are very severe and which have a very high influence on the overall global performance of the structure. Right. So here it did not collapse at this level, but it collapsed at this level. So the earthquake forces, when they travel from bottom to top of the structure, and again from top to bottom, because ultimately the load has to go to foundation, these forces, they look for where is the weakest link, which member of the building or which area of the building is the weakest. So it will attack that weakest link, and it will try to fail. So this is what happened here. Otherwise, you can see the whole building is standing. Now, this is always a fight between the architect and the engineer. Architect wants some type of structures which may be difficult to construct, but more than the difficulty level in construction, the problem is, uh, will the building remain safe during the earthquakes? So that is the whole fight between the structural engineers and the architects. Now, this is another building in this is in Sikkim. So after 2011 earthquake, there was another very small earthquake in Sikkim in 2006. So I visited that. So here you can see from a distance, I could see only this part of the building, which was very nicely constructed, decorated, colored. So you can see very nice, I mean, this portion of the window. So it appeared that there is a proper lintel band, there is a proper sill band here. But when we approached near to the building, we found this story, which was, so this is the road level. So this was slightly lower than the road level, and there were 2 more stories below that. Okay. One of the columns of this building I've shown here. So this is a very slender column, you can see. It's only about 9 inches by 9 inches, or even I think less than that. I'll show you the reinforcement detailing here. But before that, I want you to look at this figure here, this part of the photograph here. Now, this is a closer view of the photograph of the building. I hope you can identify what are the problems here in this building, in this part of the building. So, can you identify the lintel? All of us civil engineers, we know that above every opening, window opening, we must have a lintel. And here in the upper floor, I could actually imagine that there is a lintel here. But then in reality, that was not the lintel. It is only a brick layer. Now you can imagine where this load will go. There is no way that this building is going to survive. Of course, there was damage to this building, but it was under construction, so the whole building did not collapse. So this is one problem. What is the other problem? You can see here that the wall is full brick thick wall, right? So it is stretcher bond. When you come here, you can see here that suddenly the type of bond has changed, right? So these are laid along the length. These layers are laid along the width. Okay. Now, when I talked to the house owner, he told me that, I mean, initially he had some money, so he could actually use full bricks here, but then later on, because of limited funds, he had to do this. Now, you can imagine how the joint between this wall and this wall will be there. It will be very poor. It's not possible to have proper joint here. So obviously this is going to fail. Look at the reinforcement detailing here. So this is about 10 inches, 250 mm spacing between the stirrups, whereas the requirement is only 100 mm. So these are the problems that we face. So these RC frame with infill walls, these are concentrated in private buildings are non-engineered. Like we just saw this building, it is a 4-story building, but none of the engineering judgments were used. Engineers were not employed to even they check the design. So the observed issues, they include poor geometric configuration, the non-seismic detailing, the improper workmanship. We will discuss what is the seismic detailing in one of the lectures. Improper workmanship. There is no geotechnical investigation. That is one of the biggest challenges in India. Inappropriate foundation on slopes. We are very poor on construction. When we want to construct buildings on slope, there are no good guidelines available. Then minor, moderate, and severe damage depending on location and details was observed. Even collapse of these buildings was observed. So let us see some of these damages. So I will start with the Nepal earthquake of 2015. So like you know, it was a 7.8, 7.9 magnitude earthquake. It was basically it was a twin earthquake. 2 earthquakes occur within a span of a few weeks. And when I visited there after the second earthquake, the situation was horrible. This is the place Chautara where I stayed for 4 days, basically 4 nights. We planned to find some hotel, but then the entire town was collapsed. There was not a single building in the town which was standing. So we did not find any hotels, no guest house, no lodge. We had to actually spend 4 days and 4 nights in the tent. So I did not even carry tent, but some of the colleagues who were part of the team from other countries, for example, people from US were there, people from Australia and New Zealand were there. So they had additional tents. So I had to borrow tents from them. It was a, I mean, different type of experience. First time I lived in tents. You can imagine there were no toilets because there is no building left. You cannot enter these buildings to use the bathroom, toilets, and so nothing was there. It was a very different type of experience. But anyway, as far as the structural engineering is concerned, all buildings that have masonry infills, they suffer damages here. You can see this is again, you can see only the road level, you can see these 2 stories only. Right now, since this is tilted, you can see this 3rd story. But there are 3 more stories below this. right? So it was a 6-story building. Look at this building here. From the road that is there on this side, people can see 2-story, but there are 3 more stories, right? So a lot of buildings collapsed here. You can see some building. This is a reinforced concrete building, but another building that was there, which was unreinforced masonry, it was completely collapsed. You can only see the masonry, which is not brick masonry, but this is stone masonry building, right? Complete collapse. And buildings which were constructed on the top of the hills, more damage was observed in these buildings because of the ridge effect. Because if you can imagine when the hills were vibrating, the maximum vibration is there at the top. This is called ridge top effect. So this is I think 15-story masonry infilled RC frame apartments, and huge damages were there, but then they did not collapse completely. There was a reason why they did not collapse, because of the nature of the earthquake. The ground motion during this earthquake was not very vigorous. They were very gradual type of ground movement. So the buildings which have high natural period of vibration, they did not collapse completely. But buildings which have uh, I mean, of course, it depends on the distance from the epicenter also. But it was a very unique kind of event because it was the ground motion was very gradual. And this is very interesting in Nepal, and even in some cities of India, we find very large overhangs. Now these overhangs, they increases as we go from bottom to top. So here you will find maybe about 6 inches of overhangs, 150 mm. I go here, I find 1.5 feet of overhang. Go here, I find 3 feet of overhang, and here I had 5 feet of overhang. Right? What is the reason? Because there is a requirement that you cannot construct more than this here because there is a road. Okay, so people go on increasing the size of the buildings as they go on approaching the top. It's a very serious problem. But you can see here buildings on the adjacent sides they collapse, but somehow this building did not collapse. So maybe the quality of construction was very good in this case. We don't know why the collapse was not there. This is the same building from the angle, and you can see how is the overhang. You can find here the big overhang here, and people actually extend their rooms on different stories. Right? This is a very poor configuration, very risky proposition, which all of us should avoid. Some damage was observed here in the ground floor because of interaction with the adjacent building, but then somehow complete collapse did not occur. Similarly, you can find here, it's a small gully here, there's a very small road, and there's a major road here. So in order to take advantage of all the available space, the owner constructed such kind of a building. Okay, so on one hand, on one end, there were 3 columns and a cantilever. So this end. When the owner approached this phase where there is another road here, this is an intersection of the 2 roads. Here there was only 1 column, right? On the other side there were 3 columns. Now obviously this building suffered huge damage, but of course did not collapse because of the many issues, the geotechnical issues, the ground motion issues. So you can see the length of the building was about 18 meters. On one side it was about 8 meter long, on the other side it was only 1.5 meter long. So that is the irregularity we are talking about. So it's a trapezoidal plan. Floating columns is again very risky. I mean, it's highly vulnerable to such events. You can find here that's because the owner could not construct this the column at this level up to the ground, up to the foundation. So he suddenly changed the direction. Okay, and he connected this column to this beam and the different column. So of course these columns are, such type of construction is very risky. Again, the intermediate soft stories that I showed you previously in the Bhuj here. I mean, this is not a school building, but it's a office building. Some floors were left open for some functional reasons. This is again a three-story building. You can find a very small, just three columns here there in this direction and four columns in this direction. So very small building, but then it collapsed completely. So you can find one floor is here, another floor which was supposed to be here is lying here, and the top floor is again the slab is lying here. So small buildings, they also are have collapsed. It's a four-story. Another story here actually at the bottom. It was a four-story building. So this is how the poor connections were detailed. You can see only four bars here, but then a four-story building should have more bars. So not designed properly, not detailed properly. So we find such buildings collapse completely. And you can see the infill walls all lying here, around here and there. Okay, the walls collapse in the out of plane directions. The non-seismic detailing, of course, is responsible for many of such damages. You can see how the overlapping of the bars should not be provided at the same location, right? When we overlap these bars, our codes say that not more than 50% of these bars should be overlapped at the same section, but then it was not followed here. So all those bars actually failed, all those connections failed. And the code also say that it should not be done, the overlapping should be done at the mid height. Now you know the reason, because the bending moment is lower at the mid height. It is maximum near the ends. So we should avoid overlapping at the ends. But here, unfortunately, it was not done. So the complete collapse of the building. So this building is the same, this building, it completely tilted. So on this road, we can see three floors. If I go down and come back on the lower side road, I will find another three stories there. You can see here the height of the story was, the height of the building was same, but it has completely collapsed, gone down, right? And most of these buildings in this region, in this area, it actually, most of these buildings, they suffered tilting because of failure of one or two members in different locations. We actually conducted a very interesting survey in this region. This is a Chautara. This is about, I think, 4 hours, 3 hours drive from Kathmandu towards west, not northern west. Improper workmanship, a very common sight in India also. You see, we call it honeycombing. We don't bother when we construct, and later we find this, but we are very good in plastering. Once we find it, we will simply plaster these honeycombs. You can see very poor connection between walls. What happens because of this? We have severe problems like out of plane collapse of the walls. If there is no connection between the two walls, obviously the wall will not support the other wall. So this connection is weak, so one wall is actually going to fail. This is what happened in many buildings. The foundations on slope, we are very poor even in India in constructing the buildings on slope. So you can find again buildings collapsing because the foundations were very poor. Right, so this is Chautara. I mean, the different areas you can find how big gaps were created between the entry points of the house and the walls. So this should be at the same location here. Now, when we conducted a survey on this street here, so this is about maybe 2 kilometer long, which is not a big town. I mean, Chautara Street. So about a 1.5 to 2 kilometer long street. So we surveyed around 150 buildings in this on this street on both the sides. So what we observed that 49% of the buildings on upslope or flat grounds and 60% of the buildings on downslope. So these are the downslope, these are the upslopes, these buildings. So these buildings which were there on the downslope, more number of buildings collapsed. Now that is why I said the ridge top effect is there. The ground motions are more rigorous in nature at the top of the ridges. Now I come back to Indian scenario. So very similar kind of failure, very similar kind of non-ductile detailing, was actually resulted in failure of these buildings. You can see similar type of incline damage to this building. The building simply sat on the bottom side. And when you look at the column, you can find here it was very poorly detailed. In this entire region, I can only see one stirrup, right, which was damaged. So this is a Port Blair. Again, this part of the country lies in seismic zone 5. So we have certain requirements that we cannot have a column that has more than 100 mm spacing of the stirrups in this seismic zone 5. But then it was not followed here. And you can find what has happened to, you can see here. These are all the columns in the ground floor, which was open. This open ground story building, but only 3-story high, right? Luckily, no one died here because it was 1100 kilometers away from the epicenter. So it slowly sat down. So no one died. Now this is very interesting because it shows that infills are not always beneficial to the structure. See, it was a full brick thick wall, 9 inches thick wall on both the sides. Okay, there was a door opening here, like here there is a door, so there was a door opening here. Now because of that, there is a discontinuity in the lateral load resistance. So this infill actually is responsible for damage to the column. So the infill present on one side but not on the other side is also very risky approach. Okay, so during the earthquake loading, you know that a diagonal strut will form. Now because of that diagonal strut, all the axial forces that is there on the in the infill, that were transferred as shear force on these columns, and that is why you see the huge damage to the column. And there are many instances in Port Blair where we found such type of damages. You see here what is the type of problem. It is very common in India to first construct the columns, I mean the RC frame, and then we start constructing the walls. Now here we provide windows, we provide arches, and if these windows and doors and arches are near the columns, we need the lintel. So how do we provide the lintel? We break some part of the column and we insert the bars of this lintel into the column, connect to the main reinforcing bars of the column, the longitudinal bars of the column. This is a very poor method of constructing or providing a lintel because we have damaged the column. So similar thing was done here. This was an arch. So arch was constructed later. It is a reinforced concrete arch. So in order to, it's a beam actually, arch beam. So in order to support this, the column was opened, and you can see here that the bar of this arch beam was connected to this stirrup here, which was simply open, and because of that, the collapse of this column occurred. So this should not be practiced. If you have certain thing in mind, you plan it properly, and you leave open the bars for the lintel beam at the planning stage itself, at the construction itself. Again, this is a parking structure. There is nothing above this. A very simple structure, no load coming on this. This is the only structure. No structure is there on the top of this structure. Single story. But then look at the failure, the catastrophic failure of this structure here. You see, the entire columns have shifted because the design and the detailing was very poor. Look at the cracks in the beams, right? And this is the building was situated or was constructed on pile foundations. The same building from the other side. You see how badly the column was damaged. There was no reason that for such a small building, you can see here there is nothing above. For such a small building, such failure should occur. But you see the detailing was very poor in this case. Okay, the same building but on the other side. So on one side this was only parking, on the other side it was a 2-3 story building. I will show you another photograph, but the problem here you can see that the window was just adjacent to the column. Because of that, this part of the column became short column, and you know that short columns have to resist higher shear forces. Because of the shear failure in the column occurred. So here the location of the window is different, and here the location of opening is different, so it has multiple problems. The non-ductile detailing or irregularities is not problem only in case of buildings but also in water tanks. I mentioned to you why do we model the plastic hinges or the non-linearity in these buildings near the ends of the members, and this is the perfect example. You can see here the entire length of the column was not damaged, but the top and bottom of the column, every column was damaged because we have higher bending moments, higher rotational demand here. So you can see here that the damage occurred. So this is a typical example of a plastic hinge formation. Okay, the yielding occurred in the reinforcing bar, the concrete cover, it failed, but then the structure did not collapse. And finally the structure was retrofitted, I think. This is okay, this is not a building in Port Blair, but I mentioned it incorrectly here. This is a building in Sikkim. So this was after 2011 earthquake, and here also you can see why this building failed miserably. This is a hostel building, I think 4 or 5 story high, but the seismic detailing is very poor. So you can see this column here, most of these columns that were damaged did not have sufficient shear reinforcement. Okay, so you find shear failure of these columns at many locations. Now I come to the Imphal earthquake that was there in 2016. So this was also a 6.9 magnitude earthquake, and a lot of damage occurred, but I will show you some of these interesting damages. So this market building is there, which is huge. It is called Women's Market. So if you Google the woman market in Imphal, you will find very good history of these markets. In Imphal, the society is governed or controlled by women. That is very interesting. In northeastern part of country, there are many states where women are given more power to actually support their families. So this is a woman, and you can find such huge damage to columns. So many of these columns, they suffer damage. And inside you will find that it is open entirely. Only some part of the building had some slabs at different levels, but most of the part is open. So it's a 3-story building, and the damage was primarily because of poor construction. This is another interesting damage. It is a recently constructed building in 2000, I think 2015, just 6 months back it was constructed and not even occupied. It is a government building. It's basically constructed by Sports Authority of India, a hostel building to accommodate the sportsperson. But you see the kind of poor materials, poor choice, poor construction resulted in such damage. And I'll show you another photograph what happened to this building later. This is the Telephone Bhavan building, again in Imphal, moderate earthquake, moderate damage, but then it should not, such buildings which are constructed by government department, they should not get damaged in such earthquakes, because Imphal is highly seismically prone region, and we expect some such earthquakes in this region. A 4-story building, again at Devla land in Imphal, it collapsed completely. So you can find how badly the building was damaged, it performed. So later it was demolished completely, but this photograph was before demolition. So all the 4 stories, they completely damaged here. And you can find after demolition, the people were actually removing all this debris. What is the reason? Again, the reason is same. It is poor construction, poor seismic detailing. Now I'll now discuss about connections. So one primary reason for failure of these buildings, you understand now, is that the design is not proper, the construction is not proper, the seismic detailing is not proper. But then how about the connection? So you can find here the masonry wall, and it was actually connected to the frame here, but then during the earthquake it simply tilted in the out of plane direction. This is a two-story building in Port Blair again, and the entire two-story high in masonry wall collapsed. When it collapsed, you can find what happened to the fans. They all were damaged. So this happens to long walls. Now, interestingly, in most of the schools and colleges, you always have long walls, long spans. So there's always a chance, there's always a risk that these infill walls, which are very heavy, they can fall in the out of plane direction on the student sitting, teacher teaching there. Okay, this is a high risk. Now this is a market where you can find such uh, I don't know why it was constructed, but maybe to avoid rain from entry into the building. But you can find some of these structures which are arches, they collapsed in all these panels, but somehow they did not collapse here. So inside, all these panels were found lying on the ground. So point here is these masonry walls are weak in the out of plane direction, so we have to be careful. So if you remember this photograph I showed you of this column where you had the window opening here and there are ventilators here. This is the same building. This side it was only one story and it collapsed. I mean there was a huge damage to the columns. So pounding is one of the very important type of occurrence in many of these buildings. So you can find here one canteen building, and this building 3-story high. Basically it's a 2-story, but then the top story is used for another purpose, but the ground floor here was completely damaged. So there was a pounding here between these two buildings, and because of that pounding you can see what happened on the inside. So this is the inside of the building when these buildings pounded against each other during the earthquake. So the damage was because of that. And now you can imagine why the parking structure on this side was damaged. Because it was only a single story, but because of this pounding on this side, the damage occurred on these columns. So pounding also is very common in school buildings because they have different wings spanning in different directions. So we always have connections, and wherever we have these connections, we have pounding and the pounding damage. So we have to be careful by having some seismic joints wherever we have these longer spans meeting. Settlement is another issue. For example, this building, this is a market complex, and the whole market complex, they settled on one end after the earthquake. Non-structural failures, so you can see here, this is a shipyard where the damaged ships were being repaired, but then the ships were more damaged because of failure of these non-structural components. So everything fell on those small ships or boats at the bottom. So this non-structural failures, if we are not careful enough to design properly, we find huge failures. So in summary, are we not aware of the hazard? Obviously, some of us are obviously aware of the hazard. Are we pretending that all is well? I think yes. So this is a very interesting photograph that I took in Imphal, where you can read what is written on the wall, right? And it is not recent. You can see from here that it is a very old writing. It is simply says that what to do after an earthquake, right? So people in that region, they know that there is a seismic hazard, right? Everybody knows that there is a seismic hazard, but then we pretend that all is well because it is not occurring frequently. Now this writing here, it shows that everybody understands it. Now just to give you example, in last 1 month, about 6 to 8 earthquakes have occurred in Mizoram at one place only. This place is called Champai. In last about 4 months or maybe 5 months, more than 20 earthquakes have occurred in that region. So people are so afraid in that Champai district that they are not sleeping in their houses now. They have started sleeping outside, and the government is actually providing support for them to sleep outside for their food, for water, and other facilities they are creating. So that is the scenario. But then I'm sure as soon as these earthquakes they stop, I am assuming that there will not be a big earthquake. As soon as it sequence of these earthquakes stop, people will come back to their own houses, busy in their own problems. So these earthquakes, 20 earthquakes in last 4-5 months, they are of magnitude 4 to 5 to maybe 5.5. So moderate earthquakes, but they are still occurring. Now I'll spend 1 or 2 slides here to explain what we are forgetting. So these are some of the, very interesting structures. For example, this is a Assam type housing, a wooden housing type that slowly is dying. This art of construction is slowly dying. Here you find wherever these are blue marks are there, these are the wooden members. And these walls, they are not the masonry infill walls. The infill material is different. It is called ICRA. So the material is made, the ICRA walls are made using bamboo shoots. So it's a woven bamboo shoot, like a sweater, they wove it. The interwoven bamboo shoots are actually placed there between these wooden frames, and it is plastered on both the sides. So the idea here of the people was to make it light. So you can see here the sloping roof, which is a tin shed. So this the RC slab weight is not there. So these buildings, they are very flexible, they are very lightweight, so they perform really good in earthquakes. I'll tell you one very interesting story here. So this building in Port Blair, it was more than 110 years old, and it was a PWD head office, chief engineer's office. So they were actually very uncomfortable in staying in this building because they could not install ACs. During summer, they said that it is very uncomfortable. So just right across this road, they constructed this reinforced concrete building, 2-story high. And here you can see the same road here, and this building is the same building that is shown here. Right? So right across the road, they constructed it. So this building was completed in 2004 January, and everything was shifted to this building. In December 2004, this earthquake occurred in Sumatra, 1100 kilometers away from here. And look at the building, the performance. And even this area was inundated with tsunami water, with seawater. So the performance of this building was so poor that after the earthquake, these guys, they came back to this wooden building, which nothing occurred, nothing happened to this building. Right? So this is the interesting story, that we are actually forgetting this art. We are slowly moving away from these buildings which have seen 4 or 5 big earthquakes, great earthquakes in their lifespan. The only problem with these buildings is that we have to be maintaining these buildings quite regularly. If we can maintain them, they will outperform all these reinforced concrete buildings. So this is again 120 years old building, and you can see how beautiful it is. But then people don't want to live. These masonry buildings, this is again Port Blair Cellular Jail. It was constructed in 1905, 115 years old building. Some part of this building are still standing. These are unreinforced. You can see the arches, right? So if done properly, we had artisans at those times in India. We have artisans now also, but then slowly we are not actually investing in these types of buildings. This is another interesting story in Port Blair. So this is a mosque. It was constructed again in more than 120 years back using masonry. So it is an arch roof constructed with masonry. But then in the earthquake, nothing happened here. Only damage was to these minarets, which are also of masonry. So you can find here that these broken minarets are lying on the slab. Okay, otherwise there was no damage. And the reason, even these, there was no damage to even these structures. So the reason was this structure was retrofitted in 1942 and in 1980. There was an earthquake in 42 in this region. There was a big earthquake, so some damage was there. But then the local people, they identified the weaker locations in this building, which are the arches, and they retrofitted it. You see, these are simple reinforcing bars. You see here the anchor of this bar, which is going on the other side. So wherever there were arches, they retrofitted this building. And like I already said, we should avoid tension in these arches, and that is what exactly they did. They avoided the tension in the arches, and this building survived. Another interesting story, this was a 3-story building until 2013. This is a control room building which controls the ship traffic from Port Blair to Chennai. So since the traffic increased, they demanded another story because they wanted to increase the height of this tower, which controls the traffic. So another story was added to this building, a 4th story. After proper calculations, they found that the foundations are strong enough, the sizes of columns are strong enough. So they added another story in 2013-14. So people occupied this floor. Then they realized that there is no staircase to reach that floor because the contractor, while constructing, he forgot to construct the staircase. And somebody gave them idea that why don't you cut this slab here in the balcony, and then you provide a steel staircase. So this slab was cut, and you can find that this staircase was welded here. Can you identify what is the degree of inclination of this staircase? It is more than 60 degrees. I'm not sure if you have used such a high inclination staircase. It is very difficult to climb this staircase even when the building is not vibrating. During the earthquake of 2004, yes, during that earthquake, I thought I mentioned that it was constructed in 2014, but no, it was constructed in 2003. So during that earthquake, 4 people were actually sitting here working, doing their job. But during the earthquake, they could not use this staircase to come down. They were just hoping that the building should not collapse. So this is the engineering we are doing today, but this is the engineering that people did in 1940s, right? So this is the problem. And again, you see the type of engineering, we know that the forces should actually pass through a point for the better transfer of the forces. But you see, we are not doing that. These members, they are not meeting at a point. So of course, we will have such damage occurring to the gusset plates. So simple things we are not followed. Sometimes we overdo things. So you can see here the amount of reinforcement. How can concrete go inside? Right, this is again Port Blair, under constructed building. There is no way that concrete is going to go inside here. So obviously we are going to get a lot of honeycombing. But then you can ask, if we don't provide reinforcement, then the Indian codes will not be satisfied. Of course, the Indian codes will not be satisfied if the sizes of the members are small. We are not ready to increase the dimensions of the members, the cross section of the member. If the cross section is small, we'll always have a problem. So the design approach, I think I will discuss these issues later in the another presentation. But what should be stronger, the frame or the infill? So there are many studies which say that of course we should have infill that should be weaker than the frame. Only then you have better performance of the buildings. But I'll discuss this later when I discuss the design issues. So there are certain cases like how should we approach? So the approach should be whatever is the design moment in the frame, we always design for at least 50% of the design forces. So we have seen that when we construct the infill wall, the bending moment in the RC frame reduces. But even if it is reduced, we have to design with 50% at least, so that in case the infill walls fail, we have some design strength remaining with the column. We have to provide special confining shear reinforcement in these columns near the openings. Care should be taken while deciding the position of openings, and the connection should be proper between the RC frame and the masonry. So thank you very much for your attention. I think it was a long presentation. I will stop here by showing you this beautiful photograph, which I took when I visited Belgium. This is a small university town called Leuven. It is very famous for masonry structures. So every structure that you see here, including the roads, that are made of masonry, right? So they are so popular there. They are very emphatic about the construction of masonry. So most of these structures are constructed of masonry. So thank you very much, and I stop my presentation. And if you have any question, then we can discuss. So I can see some of them were not able to see my screen. Maybe initially. And there were two Hemant sir. That is because the Google Meet, when I start presenting, it it actually shows two screens, one my presentation and one my normal screen. Hmm. Yes. No, temperature stresses are not that high that the masonry will fail. Temperature stresses are there, but they are very low. Okay. It is difficult to say sitting here. And we have to see at least the photographs. If we can see them, then we can discuss. But without seeing, without looking at it, it is not possible to tell the reasons. Sometimes, in my personal experience, when I visit sites, I see some of these cracks. These are the result of the settlement in some cases. But this particular case, we have to see. Yeah, it is basically not story, but every column. What the code say that in each column, in each member, not more than 50% of the bar should be overlapped at a particular section. Okay, like I showed one damage where they actually overlapped all the bars. Right, so that is the particular case where the failure of the column occurred. So to avoid that, we have to restrict the overlapping at a section. Not more than 50% of the thing should occur actually. I think we will discuss this in my presentation on design, because I know this infill is very famous. when everywhere infills are there and many people are doing research on this infill wall. So I have specifically kept that lecture to address this modeling as well as analysis and design thing. So I request Ravi Kumar to attend that lecture. There many methods are there, and in fact I was involved in a very interesting project with Assam State Disaster Management Authority, where we developed very simple strengthening schemes for open ground story buildings in Guwahati, and these are going to be implemented. Let us see. I'm not sure if we can include everything in this 10 lectures. Okay, if time permits, then we can, or otherwise maybe some other time we can discuss. Yeah, what happens during pounding that if you have two buildings, I hope you can see me. You're able to see me. So okay, so let us say.
Yes, sir. I am able to see you.
So let us say these are the two buildings, right? And you have slabs here. So this is one building with the slab, is another building with another slab here. So this finger, you can assume that it is a slab. So during earthquakes, if these slabs collide with each other, then you can imagine there is an additional vibration in the building because of that additional vibration, and these will keep on pounding with each other. So because of that additional vibration, there will be additional damage. Now this is one kind of damage, but more uh, uh, peculiar damage occurs when you have different floor heights. So one building, the slab is here, another building, the slab is here, but then this pounding is occurring at an intermediate level. So what happens, this slab, which is rigid in its own plane, it is actually pounding the columns, which are flexible. And this slab here, it is pounding the upper floor, right? So because of that, what happens, because of this pounding effect, the damage to these columns is huge, right? So there are two cases. One, the pounding occurs at the same level. Then the pounding occurs at different levels. For both the cases, you have huge damages. Now, how to avoid it? It is very simple. Our codes say that the allowable drift in any building, allowable drift is 0.4%, right? So this 0.4% means what? 0.4 divided by 100 into building height, right? So 0.004 times the height of the building. That is the allowable drift in the building. That is how much the buildings can deflect. So this is deflection of one building. You calculate deflection of other building, right? And then you use a response reduction factor, which we'll discuss later. Increase this deflection. So that is the gap that should be there between these two buildings. If you can do this, you can avoid the pounding. Yeah, it is very common. See, the reason people provide masonry wall is different. They want to create some enclosed spaces. Okay. If you want to create a room, you cannot provide diagonal members, right? The enclosure will not be there. So to create enclosed spaces, they use the masonry infill wall. Now, I agree that if you can provide these diagonal members, the bracings in the open ground story, then it will help, right? So you are removing infill wall in the ground floor to create the parking space, but then you can include these diagonal members. to increase the strength and stiffness. It is good. And many people have done research in different countries, in India also, and we have found that these couplers are good. But the only thing is, our section sizes should be sufficient uh, uh, to insert these couplers. We cannot have very small sections and then couplers, mechanical couplers inside. But couplers are always good. I mean, of course, how do we connect two bars? We use that binding wire, right? We just have two bars overlapping each other, and then we use the binding wires. Sometimes we weld them, but welding reduces the strength of the bar. So couplers, mechanical couplers are always better. See, you cannot ask such a question to a structural engineer. A structural engineer is a person who can design anything, right? Now, if you have a circular columns, and if you ask me to design a flat slab, of course I will design, right? If it is a requirement, then I'll design it. Okay, so depending on requirement, we can design any structure, but then don't restrict the sizes. Maybe in that case, the depth of the flat slab will be much larger, right? The sizes of the columns will be much larger, but anything is possible if you follow good construction practice and if you adhere to all the seismic codes. Yes, yes. See, mostly they construct, if they are constructing in cities, what they call downtown in their languages, so they are steel buildings. Okay, mostly steel buildings. They construct reinforced concrete, but not that much. In India, we have mostly reinforced concrete buildings. And in steel buildings also, they use many other types of materials to create enclosed spaces. They also use masonry walls also is being used, but that masonry wall is not inserted in the open space of the frame. So there is no interaction between the masonry and the columns. Yeah, so masonry is separated. The columns are separated. That is how they do. Yeah, sure. So thank you. Yeah. Yes.